This video is for the artists out there who are considering pursuing real estate, but I'll also say just considering pursuing business, entering the business world in a real way. I just recently made a video saying that in my opinion, artists would make the best real estate agents in the year 2024 and moving forward. And I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that. I want to sort of expand on that idea and address a common struggle that comes up for artists and creatives, which is the struggle of making good money when you come from the art world and now all of a sudden maybe you're making good money or trying to make good money, but also not just going from like broke to having a good job, but let's imagine a scenario where you went from being starving artist to millionaire. My name is Jesse Lynch. I run multiple real estate teams around the United States, and this channel is about helping people who want to change the outcome of their life as a real estate agent, and specifically people who want to do things a bit differently in this real estate world. So if that's you, come hang out for a while, hit the subscribe button, and check out jesselynch.co for different ways that we could potentially work together. And if it's not for you, doing things differently, then go ahead and just keep it moving. Artists out there, I want to be clear that this is not to diminish the work that you've done or the effort that you put in, or even more importantly, the shit that you've learned along the way. I think that is deeply valuable. You can watch the other video where I talk about how valuable those things are. This is also not about giving up passions in the interest of money worship. I want to be very clear about that. This is not to convince any artist to leave art behind, but more a conversation with an artist who may be watching this, who already is leaning into the idea of starting a business, right? Leaning into the idea of getting into real estate, like paralyzed by all of this other bullshit that surrounds it, that surrounds sort of the transition from art into business. So I'll start with what I think is probably the biggest factor for most people who are, leaving that world behind, even if only kind of, right? Which is ego death. And by ego death, what I mean is that you're currently identify as an artist, right? You value that part of yourself. And I think rightfully so. I think these are things that are worth valuing within yourself. And then you have to internally rebrand yourself to maybe I'm an artist, but I also am a business person. And rebranding yourself in your own mind is a mind fuck. But I think these are sort of questions around like, what does being an artist mean to you, right? And that's kind of the stuff that I want to dive into. Like, why does the idea of a starving artist have to be prevalent? Why is in our culture, why is it inherently two separate sides, right? Like two complete opposites to be an artist and to be into business? I think there's a whole world out there on the internet and whatever, on social media, on YouTube, just existing in the real world that is business owners who come from art and who weave that art into their business. And I think really deep down, all of the products that you've ever really identified with, all of the brands that you've ever really identified with, there is probably an artist at the helm. But I think along with that ego death is one of the biggest aspects of the whole thing, which is internally, you're struggling to figure out who you identify as. But then externally, there's this really massive fear of being judged. But who says that you can't play music and be cool and do cool things, but also be a successful business owner? I think there's this idea that people will take you less seriously if you are successful in business and also making art, right? Because the idea of a lot of art is that you have to be like struggling or sad or whatever to make the art. And I think we sort of set these limits on ourselves, right? Like, or basically there's outside pressure that says you can't be successful and be punk, right? I come from sort of a hardcore music background. I don't know, we called it like heavy indie music eventually, but there's a lot of pressure, right? To be DIY, to be broke, to be struggling. And I think that those are basically fake. They're made up concepts. Maybe the pressure is real, right? Maybe that really does exist, but they're kind of nonsensical. And I think the truth is that no matter what you do, there's gonna be people who are haters, right? There will be haters, people who don't like how you're going about things. That will always exist. regardless of if it's art or business or just whatever, just existing at somebody else's business, right? Being a cog in the wheel. There will be people who don't like how you play the cog in the wheel. In dipping your toes into the business world or the entrepreneurial world, even if you're continuing to play music, your broke peers will probably judge you, right? Some of them, and you can't let it faze you. I would also like to hammer home the idea that most of that fear, most of that judgment is actually internal. You'll find that to the extent that you're being judged by your peers, the voice in your own head is going to be way louder than that actual vocal judgment from other people, right? It's that internal rebranding that you're going through that you will basically project other people's judgment onto yourself. And the people who actually do judge you, it's basically jealousy. It comes from a lack of understanding. And what are you gonna do? That sort of like negative energy will always exist in this world. There are always gonna be people who just want to take a negative approach. It's probably a defense mechanism for them. So to the extent that you can say that's on them and I feel bad for them for, going about things that way, I think will ultimately serve you for the better. And the good news is that some of your peers, and probably the closest peers to you, right? The people who you're tightest with, will likely shift with you. At the very least, they'll respect what you're doing, especially if you're in a band and you could help fund the band. They probably wouldn't be too mad at that. But nonetheless, the closest people to you, the people who I think really, really will matter to you in the long term, right? Your friends, your confidants, they will either shift with you or they'll just applaud you for making that shift. And it's my experience that the artist who's chasing money will lose. It really is my experience that the artist who's chasing money and popularity and all that will lose. That is not really a good way to make something unique, right? You're probably just being a carbon copy of something else that has been successful. And because you're a carbon copy, it will be very difficult for you to be successful. But the artist without ambition or without any drive at all is also very lost. And that's a very difficult place to be. If you're an artist out there, I think you probably have found that a lot of the artists out there maybe have talent and skill, but they don't have ambition or drive. And those two things that if you're watching this and you have ambition and drive and talent and skill, that's a rare combination of person. And that's why on the other video, so much of what I was talking about was sort of about the hustler, the band leader, right? Or the solo entrepreneur photographer, right? The person who's like starting a company, trying to figure out a way to make money doing this thing that they really, really enjoy. Not the person who's along for the ride, whether that's in a group of musicians, I don't know. There's all sorts of people who just are along for the ride, and maybe they have natural talent, but they don't have that ambition, they don't have that drive. Again, that's the super, super important stuff. That's the true special sauce of, in my opinion, both art and business. And so if a friend is going to judge you for even trying to go from broke artist to successful entrepreneur, are they really your friend? And probably not, right? The real friends will continue to support you. If somebody's support is conditional upon what you're doing in a career, if somebody's love is conditional upon what you're doing in a career, unless you're murdering people as a career, they're not really a supportive individual. They're not really supporting you. Maybe they find their relationship to you is helpful to them. And if they're not supporting, they might actually think what you're doing is cool, but they're actually jealous, and they won't support the business that you're doing anyway. If they're judging you for what you're doing, they're not gonna turn into a client, so who cares, right? Now I wanna kind of move into this concept that I call dream big. Dream big is sort of this mental exercise. It's sort of flexing a creative muscle to say like, what could my life look like? What's the coolest, most ideal situation that my life could be? And it's really difficult. I say it's a creative muscle because I think it genuinely takes work. It takes effort to sort of expand what life could look like. I think as an artist, there was a time in my life where to make $100,000 in a year was, whoa, right? That would be unbelievable. It took dream big to say, well, what would $1 million a year look like? There's a lot of people out there who make $1 million a year. And I think I'm cooler than them, right? I think I'm maybe more ambitious than them, but there's a lot of people out there making $1 million a year. So why couldn't I? And it took that work to get to a place where I could actually imagine this really, really cool life. So if you took that and applied it to the music world, right, or to the art world in general, what would that look like? And I think probably it would be playing crazy shows, right? Massive sold out shows for adoring audiences, right? It would be people respecting your art and people thinking you're cool, right? Being popular as an individual and also just as an artist. It would probably mean traveling the world. It would mean having really cool friends, but it would also mean being rich, probably having a crazy mansion, cars, freedom to do kind of whatever you want, options from both just a life aspect, but also probably from like a romantic attention aspect. But I think if I get really reductive with it, probably the two most things that people are looking for, glory and money. And maybe there's like community wrapped in there too, right? But glory and money are probably the most basic concepts. And I would say, think about the glory side of things as like, people think you're cool, you're playing cool shows, you're making cool albums, you're working with really cool artists, whatever that happens to be. There's some glory associated with it. But other than the glory associated with being cool and profound and unique, what does the life actually look like? What does your day-to-day life in a dream big scenario look like? And I believe that you can accomplish those things without the ego, right? Without the glory. Those are really what life looks like. There are plenty of people who have experienced immense amount of glory who are deeply, deeply depressed, right? In the art world, in the music world. And as a side note, you're telling yourself that your ideal dream big with art or music or whatever doesn't come with money. I think you're kind of full of shit, right? If you think that there's no glory attached to that, I kind of think you're lying to yourself. Even if you try really hard to keep your ego in check with all of those things, I think at the end of the day, acceptance or something like that, and expression is something that you're looking for. But if you were just into expression, there's a different thing than just expressing yourself onto a piece of paper, right? Or a canvas, and sharing that with the world and looking for feedback. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's good. I think there's way too many people out there who make the art but then don't share it, because I think the community associated with the sharing of it is something that's super, super important, right? I think that's probably true of entrepreneurs and business people as well. There are people who just spend time trying to make money, right? Trying to grow their business, but they don't share any of that with anybody else. And I think that's part of what this channel is about, is that sharing that journey is actually very satisfying. Sharing the thoughts, the sort of way that I'm processing things is actually really helpful and very nice for me to be able to do. So can you at least consider that the side of you that's in pursuit of glory, right, with this art thing, might be keeping you from other great joys in life? Again, I really like art. I really value art. I value that expression, all of those things. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are holding themselves back from something that they would also really, really enjoy because of all these other things. And one of those things that they're afraid of, I think, is a fear or a worry that you would have to change, right? That you as an individual would have to change to accomplish these other things. Above everything else, starting your own business can be extremely rewarding. I know a lot of artists who eventually become entrepreneurs because art is a hustle, right? And we do get addicted to it. I'm not afraid to say that, like, I'm a workaholic. I really, really enjoy the hustle. I like to be busy. So keep your passions, and I think you'll find there's something very, very satisfying about owning a business, running a business, molding a business. And specifically, in this case, the business of being a real estate agent, right? Or whatever financial situation. And being an agent, starting a company doesn't mean you have to wear a suit and tie and be a sellout and be a dork, right? You can dress however you want, you can have tattoos, you can, I don't know, do crazy stuff, right? You can split your tongue, if you want. And you could also be a millionaire. You also could be a billionaire, right? There are artists out there who started businesses who are now billionaires. I think there's probably diminishing returns, right? From multi-millionaire to billionaire. I don't know how dramatically life would change. Somebody who comes to mind is Jack Conte, who is, for one, a member of the band Pomplamoose, and two, the owner of Patreon, right? And so Patreon is a multi-billion-dollar company, and he started Patreon in service of his art, right? And then turns out, well, I guess that was a really, really good idea, and it's added incredible value to a lot of people. And so by adding value to the world, he's getting paid for it, and on a pretty unbelievable level. But he still values art, right? He values making art, and so he does continue to make art, both music, YouTube videos. If you haven't watched, there's a YouTube channel called Digital Spaghetti, super cool. He talks to really cool creators on the likes of YouTube. Digital Spaghetti, super sick. That's Jack Conte on there, the owner of Patreon, and it's not always obvious if you're watching those videos. And so with all this said, right, all this negative, all this potential concern, and all these hurdles that people have to get over, I just want to sort of hone in on what I think of as like a redemptive side, which is that as an artist entering the business world, the real estate world, you have an incredible upper hand on the average new agent or business owner. You can watch the other video for why I believe that. It's also a decently long video where I talk about that. The opportunity in real estate is insane. You could absolutely be a millionaire through real estate and live an incredible life. There are endless opportunities from a business standpoint, so even if it's not real estate, there are tons of those opportunities out there. And just know that, like, once you're in it and you're doing it and you're feeling the joy of the hustle and you're getting addicted to the hustle, again, it's not money worship. It's just absolute enjoyment of the process. And once you learn to love the process, and once you find yourself in it and realize that, you're like, wow, I really enjoy this, you'll understand where I'm coming from in saying that all of this fear about outside judgment is misguided. And before I go, I want to leave you with this one last thought, and I promise it's important, don't click away. It's one of my favorite quotes. I don't remember who said it, but I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a very, very wise thing, which is that time is fear's favorite food. The longer you wait worrying about something, being afraid of making another step, the bigger that's gonna get. And so the more dug into a lifestyle, a community, a restrictive covenant of a certain culture or subculture, the more dug into that you get, the more difficult it's going to be for you to leave. So there is no better time than the present. I'll see you in the next video.